Hello friends and welcome to my channel for another custom figure video. Today we're making a diorama, so I guess technically it's not a figure video, but there's figures in it. Now the Superman movie just came out, and if you watch this channel you know I'm a huge Superman fan. I'm a comic book artist by trade. Superman is the whole reason I got into that. I've loved the character my whole life. It's very fun to see all the excitement for Superman right now. It is absolutely rubbing off on me. As somebody who is like always already excited about Superman, it's been really nice to see like the joy of the character and people just like being really into him right now. So I've been having a great time, and I've been making custom figures based on the movie. Regardless of some of my feelings toward the movie, I really like the character designs. I like the casting. I like the visuals of the world. So I'm really embracing that with my collection. Now I am excited about making a diorama based on the Fortress of Solitude as it appears in the film. I've always wanted to make like a cool Superman based diorama, but my favorite context for the character is like in the city of Metropolis, or flying around, or you know, opening his shirt in a phone booth in an alley and that kind of thing. And there's never really been like a Superman centric location that I really wanted to make. Like the previous versions of the fortress are just kind of like boring to me. Like there's not a lot of character to it. It's just a bunch of like crystal spikes, and it doesn't really do it for me. But this version I really loved. He's got, you know, a kind of computer console of sorts. There's tech around it. There are things in this version of it that create a lot of visual interest and give it character. And that really spoke to me, and it made me want to make a version of it. So that's what we're going to do today. First, we'll take a look at the supplies going into it, the plan that I've drawn up for it, and then we'll get right into building it. So first, real quick, let's take a look at what's on the shelf right now. This is just a quick and dirty little setup. It's mostly the McFarlane Kenner Superpower tribute line Fortress of Solitude playset. I wanted to have something in a background until I was able to build a diorama, and I didn't know how long it was going to take me to actually get it done. Turns out I got it done pretty quick. But this served the purpose for a couple of weeks, and I actually will end up using the computer console sort of thing in the center that Superman is standing on as part of this diorama. And as soon as I put this on the shelf, I was like, I can't wait to make something better. So let's take a look next at the drawing I did. This is a sketch of the general idea of what I want this thing to look like. Sometimes I don't do a sketch because I have a pretty clear idea in my head, but this one, because I'm working with these like crystal shapes and things I've never really done before, I wanted to have something to work off of, just a little more concrete. So these are the basic supplies going into the general base of this thing. Foundation of it is going to be this pink insulation foam. I've used this on the channel a ton of times. Most diorama makers use this stuff. You can get it at Home Depot. I always like to mention that Australian folks can get it at Bunnings Warehouse. This stuff is really great for carving and shaping and cutting, and you know, you can make brick out of it, you can make concrete out of it. This is something I learned from Al Figures when I first started this journey into making dioramas, so check out his page because he's got a lot of really helpful tips on how to do this stuff. This is a piece of off-cut plexiglass that I'm going to be using for the back of this. And then these are a bunch of acrylic rods that I got. They're all kind of bundled together. I got you know, several pieces of it, and these are going to be the basis for what I use to make the crystals. And then I'm going to be painting it with just standard craft store acrylic paint. This stuff is a couple bucks a bottle, nothing fancy. And then for the snow effects, I got this Deco Art Snow Tex. They have this at the craft store, and it looks like a really great way to do snow texture. I've never used it before, but I'm excited to try it out. So there'll be some other tidbits along the way that I'll mention as I go. But let's take a look at the shelf that it's going to go on and get an idea for the space this thing is going to fill. All right, so here's the basic shape of this thing. So that plexiglass has the backing film on it, and once I take that off, it's going to be clear. And the plan is I'm actually going to frost it with something not dissimilar to this, but just a little bit more transparent. If you look at photos or footage of the one in the movie, there's this wall of crystals that kind of fans out like that over it. And then that computer console thing is right there in the center. So I'm going to be emulating that, and I wanted it to be backlit because that's how it looks in the movie. You know, you could achieve the same overall kind of vibe by doing like spikes of crystals made out of this foam. But it's going to be solid. It's not going to look transparent. It's not going to look like crystal. It's going to just look like white painted foam. So the plan is to have light coming on the back of this. And I picked up some cool white LED little string lights. So those are going to run behind that and illuminate this from the back. And then the crystals are going to be in front of it. The basic shape is in place. You know, there'll be some kind of platforms, I think, to one side, and then, you know, spikes coming out in different spots. Ton of work to do to this thing, but it's blocked out in the display cabinet, so that is step number one. Now, I should mention, this is not meant to be like a perfectly screen accurate to scale diorama. This is a figure display stand that is meant to evoke the look of the fortress in the movie. So obviously it's not going to be to scale, and there's going to be a lot of abbreviated aspects to it. One of those being this kind of control console thing on the side here. So in the film, there's this kind of like server bank looking thing. To approximate that, I'm using this piece. This was actually a wall piece from the interior of a Cowabunga Karl van from the 2007 Ninja Turtles movie. I cut off this piece because it was just kind of extraneous. So I'm going to be painting this up and adding little lights to it, and you know, it's going to give the look of that console more or less. So that pops right in there like that, and then I've cut this foam board around it, and I'm going to be doing some paper mache rock wall, very similar to what I did with my 89 Batcave diorama. So that's going to kind of fill out this area, and then this piece is going to go here. There are these kind of like second story platform things that you see in the film. This is going to kind of emulate what that looks like, and then the rock wall will come out like that. And we're going to have the crystals going all up and down like this. We're going to have some coming out through here, you know, smaller clusters of them. So there's going to be a lot left to do, but I wanted to get the main structure down first. All right, pardon the absolute mess of a workbench here, but I'm making some good progress. I got a bunch of these pieces cut. This is very tedious. I had to get out my miter saw and do some little bit of cutting and sanding and stuff, but these are super glued to this piece of plexiglass. I removed one of the backing film pieces. I still have the other one on the other side, as you can see. I have this slot here that the plexiglass was fitting into, and I've actually cut out the shape of the bottom of these pieces, and my hope is that I can just slot it right in there and then hot glue it in place. And then there's going to be plaster and stuff that goes in to fill that out a bit as well. And then I do have these other crystal pieces that I have cut and sanded down to give them more of that sort of like ice spire look. And these are going to go across the front of these as a second layer. So I'm going to get that set in there, and then hopefully this thing will be ready to start doing some plastering with. So here I'm building out that rock wall, and I used all of the offcut pieces from the base of the diorama, like where I cut out the stairs and, you know, some of the trim pieces that were on some of the other platforms that I put on here, and I saved them, and here I am just hot gluing them to the foam board to bulk it out. And I'm really happy with this because I don't like to waste stuff. I don't like to put things in the garbage, and here I'm just using the offcut stuff. These are little pieces that I had to pull out when I was cutting the holes for the crystals out and stuff, and then I just mixed them with some Mod Podge, which is basically the same thing as Elmer's glue, more or less. And I kind of made a paste out of it and then just like filled in all the little gaps with it. So none of this stuff that ordinarily would have just been in the trash ended up in the trash. It's all put back into the diorama. And then here I am just paper macheing some newsprint strips by dipping them into a bit of watered down Mod Podge. Then you let them set for a little bit, and then they dry pretty rigid, and you have yourself a rock wall. So initially I was planning to use plaster of Paris to kind of fill in these cracks and sort of sculpt out some of the rock formations, but it's pretty messy stuff, and I haven't used it in years, and I was like, I don't know if I feel like doing all that. So I decided to use some air drying clay that I had around. I bought a big brick of this for another project. I used it one time, and I've just been keeping it ever since. So this was a perfect opportunity to use some of it up. It's exactly what it sounds like it is, clay that dries from air exposure. I knew that that was going to give me a little bit more malleability in terms of like actually sculpting it. So here you can see I blended it into the flat surfaces pretty well. So it should be a nice kind of easy transition. Next up was painting the whole thing black. These things are a lot easier to see what's what with when everything is one color. So instead of having the pink and the off-white of the clay and all that in the newspaper, it's just one color, and it really starts to come together at this stage. And the reason you start with black, you don't have to, but I like to do it, and I learned to do it this way, is because it gives you a nice underpainting to work with. So these black areas are going to give it depth. When you start to go in with gray and snow and everything, those black parts are going to make it have a lot more gravity. So here I've mixed a gray color and I'm dry brushing it onto the black. And you can see how the black shows through in the areas where the paint is thinner. That's exactly what I want. Especially here on these little ridges, I'm just dusting the paint on the raised areas. And so the recessed parts are staying black, and that's what gives it that shadow and that look that it's actually rock, you know, and light's not penetrating those areas. Now, this is my first time using one of these sponge brushes on a diorama like this, and I gotta say, I don't know why I wasn't doing this before. I would just use like a normal big paintbrush, and you know, the bristles would leave streaks and stuff. With this, you can just really put it on, and I'm just pushing the sponge against the foam, and I'm just rubbing it around and blending it. And that is really giving me exactly the kind of finish I want. I wanted it to be this kind of uneven look because it is supposed to be a natural surface, right? Like it's stone, it's rock. It's not going to be like a perfectly uniform pouring of cement. But even like a cement floor would have variations in it. So this was kind of the perfect balance for me. And I know my hand's in the way a little bit here, but you can see I'm just, again, dusting those raised areas with the paint. And that's what's going to give it that perfect texture. And really, you're letting the texture do the work for you. Like, I'm not painting it to look any specific kind of way with like a skill set necessarily beyond knowing when to go a little bit lighter and a little bit heavier. Next up, I need to paint the crystals.
Hold on. I forgot to put in the crystals.
So I'm mixing white with a little bit of a light blue color, and that's going to give me just the slightest tint of blue. And I'm basically frosting these with some dry brushing. This material is like a very smooth acrylic, so it's not going to like absorb the paint at all, but you can smudge it on there and get the desired effect. I want these to have that kind of cloudy look that they do in the film. I'm not going to be able to totally approximate it because those are probably made by some kind of casting process and it's a different kind of material. And I'm not doing all that. I'm just using available stuff that I'm modifying. So painting some of the vein work on here to give it that look. And then I go in with that same blue and I kind of dusted and dry brushed the whole area to kind of give it like some glow effect. Now, once I put the snow on this, a lot of that is going to disappear, but some of it still does come through. And so it still helps to give the desired effect. And I can actually add some of this back to the snow later on if I want to. But all in all, I'm really pleased with how these crystals turned out with this kind of painting. And it was actually pretty fun to do. I was kind of like, oh, there's a lot of them. But it might have been one of the more enjoyable aspects of building this diorama. So next I want to customize this little McFarlane computer console thing. These blue domes on it look super goofy and I want to replace them with these plastic pieces. These are just like some packaging from some medication or something. I don't know if they were like a nasal spray or what, but I always keep stuff like this because I'm like, I could use that for something. And in this case, I could. So I decided to take these off. They were actually on there really, really hard. I'd like to find out what kind of glue they used because this stuff was tough. But then, yeah, I put the light up through it and then glued these on and was good to go. So here I'm adding that Snowex stuff, and I started off using a brush for these smaller areas. And at first I was enjoying it, but then it was either sticking to the brush or it kind of wouldn't come off of it the right way. So I eventually switched to using a palette knife, and that worked a lot better. And once I got the ball rolling on that and I was in a groove, this stuff was just really, really fun to apply. And you can see how it kind of comes off the palette knife really easily. And it just, you know, you can kind of scrape it on in all the places you want. Yeah, and just that little jar that I got was enough to do this whole diorama, and I had some left over. So the last order of business was to do this little kind of glacier frozen stream thing. These run through this version of the fortress. You can see it in set photos and, you know, during the movie. And I wanted to approximate that because I really like that aspect of this. And so I decided I was going to use styrene initially, but I decided on using some black paper. And then I just went in with different shades of blue acrylic paint and just kind of painted it to look like it was deeper in some areas. Then I took a couple of pieces of the plastic window from the actual McFarlane Superman figures that I got and layered them on top to kind of give it that ice look. And then I painted some rock on top of it just to make it sort of flow into what's there. I initially thought I would pour some clear resin, but I decided that was way too much for just this little piece of the diorama. So I went with using some would-be trash, and I'm really happy with the result. I think it's exactly what I was trying to get. So here's a final look at all of the figures that I have so far in the display. And just as a reminder, here is what it looked like before. So this is with the little rinky-dink cardboard McFarlane backdrop. And what a big difference. I'm so thrilled with how it turned out. This really just fleshes out that shelf so well and gives it a really nice themed look. I think that this, while not one-to-one scale, it does evoke the spirit of the version in the movie, which I'm very, very happy with. And just adds a lot of visual interest to the shelf. This was probably to date the hardest diorama that I've ever made. Just so many different materials and a bunch of stuff I've never tried before, things I've never tried together. So it was a lot of fun, and I'm really, really happy with how it ended up looking. The difference of putting these figures in that context is so cool. Now, obviously the lights aren't as bright when the cabinet display lights are on, but the effect is diminished on camera. When the crystals are lit up to the naked eye in person, under this cabinet light, it still looks pretty good. So this shelf actually sits just below my other main Superman display. So these are all of my Superman and Superman family, I guess, figures. And this is kind of a rinky-dink old diorama. I need to update this at some point. It's a section of the Daily Planet rooftop. And it's got, as you can see, various customs as well as legit releases. This is my recent animated style, but realistic Superman and Clark Kent. And I just love this pairing. I love looking over at these and seeing, a lot of Superman in this one area. Yeah, I think this movie stuff, it's a lot of fun, and it's a really fun addition to the collection overall. So that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank you all so much for watching and hanging out with me as I made this. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'm going to put some links to some of the products that I used in here in case you want to track them down and try it yourself. As always, hitting that like button helps other people find the video, but you can also share it with a friend who loves Superman or who loves this movie or who loves action figures. And I invite you to subscribe as well. I'm always making cool stuff on the channel, and you should come check it out. So that's going to do it for this one. Until next time, keep your head on swivel.